Everybody. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It is September 9th, 2025 at 5:30. This is the ACT Committee meeting, Administration, Communication Technology. My name is Brian Travis. I'm the chair of this committee. I'm here with my colleague, Brian McGinnis. It's unclear if Sheila Vaccaro will be here, will be late. So I am calling this meeting to order, and our second actually agenda item is announcements. I don't believe that we have any announcements on the agenda. Do you have any announcements? All right, so we will go to our third item. Comments and suggestions, petitions by residents, taxpayers, and visitors in attendance regarding items that are not on the agenda. Looking at an old agenda. So actually, we do have announcements. It is October 15th, 2025 at 6:30. The first announcements that we have, three announcements tonight. They're all for public hearings, scheduled to be on October 15th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. The first is a public hearing for comments on Comcast's past performance under its current franchise agreement. The second is a public hearing to amend certain regulations in subsection 3-38.t, which is the Community Campus Committee. The third announcement for a public hearing is the public hearing to enact an ordinance reauthorizing the Westchester Business Improvement District 5-year final plan. Now we will go to item number 3. Comments, suggestions, petitions by residents, taxpayers, and visitors in attendance regarding items that are not on the agenda. Please be advised that there's a 5-minute time limit, which is at the discretion of the chair. Yes.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. When is the Westchester University Master Plan meeting going to be? Thank you.
Well, we had a Westchester master plan meeting at last night at Esplend Hall. When is our hearing scheduled, do you mean? I don't know. Do we know when that is? We do have a scheduled date. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
They have an extension until the end of November, so I don't think anything's scheduled yet.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have reports. First up is, there are no reports. Old business, approve the September 2025 meeting minutes. Brian was absent. I reviewed them. They all look like they've captured everything that we talked about. Next item on the agenda is to discuss, so this is an item that is recurring. We have another discussion with a fairly lengthy one to discuss the special event procedures for discounted fee. This would be something that the borough would potentially assist with. This would be for largely would be non-borough events, so things that wouldn't come through Parks and Rec, so on and so forth. I did reach out to my colleagues after a conversation. So I reached out to Brian and Sheila, and I was under the assumption at this point that we would table this item indefinitely because we weren't really reaching much of an agreement where we would go. However, both of my committee members assured me that they felt that there was something there to discuss still. Brian, since you weren't here during the last meeting, I would love to know what your feelings are on this item.
Thank you. Yes, I think that we need to be clear and concise about how these events are going to affect the borough as far as what services that we're going to be providing. There's a list here, and I believe this is from a city that
Wilmington, North Carolina.
Wilmington, North Carolina. Thank you. That has a list of criteria for support for special events. It's about 15 points here. And it also describes the list of supported events that are underneath these 15 points. And certainly there's some things, that are interesting that we should probably look into as far as the criteria that would come underneath these type of special events. And that's my opinion, looking at population, looking at the services rendered and provided, such as police, public works, things of that nature, what would be indicative, and as well as, how open it is to the public, the difference between a run or a borough-wide event rather than a borough or a regional event within the borough that would be done by wards. So that's where I'm at. And again, with that, it mentions in here that the city of Wilmington, in this case also the borough, shouldn't be the sole financer of events, right? So I think that is key. And percentage of where these events are going to take place within the borough and how that would pertain. As I again mentioned it, we talked prior about the restaurant festival, which is a borough event, but we talked about the Chili Fest that's coming up this Sunday, the Christmas parade, Halloween parade, how all those things are different. And we know the special event is going to be the Christmas parade because of the draw that brings in. So that's where I'm at, is making sure that we have a specific criteria that would determine the potential funding, I should say, for these events, and meeting that standard.
So Bill's put the attachment up, which was not included when we discussed this last time. And so I thought this was widely distributed, and I was incorrect. So we've added this to this agenda. Can you go back to the attachment, Bill? Okay, go scroll up, please, to number 1. All right, so yeah, there's a long list of criteria. This is just an example, possibly to use as a proxy for this discussion, and I have referenced this before. So I don't know that we would have 15 criteria, Brian, but I think that there's something here that we could probably follow as a loose outline. Some of the things we've talked about before are, what's the economic impact to our town center business district? Would that be a qualification? What is definitely attendance? Is this a non-sponsored borough-wide event? So on and so forth. We've had a lot of different ideas. I mentioned in the last meeting that Philadelphia actually has a fund, the city of Philadelphia. It's called the Philadelphia Activities Fund, where they help assist some of these organizations with funds for security or other expenses that they have that they incur to put on events. I also mentioned it's not just about business activity in all cases for all municipalities. In some cases, it's promoting culture and arts or something that's a little bit more diverse. And so I've done an exhaustive, basically bunch of research to determine what are the possibilities and what would qualify. But what I keep going back to is this example that Katie Walker gave to us back when we were discussing the Christmas parade. And so I think there are 2 things to consider here. It's the criteria for what would qualify. And I did talk to a couple other council members, not everybody, but I did talk to a few. And right now, the one event that we think might qualify for some assistance would be the chili cook-off, based on, again, generally the criteria that Wilmington, North Carolina follows, and if we followed something similar. So if I could just go through a checklist to help kind of walk through what we might decide our criteria would be. I think number 1, the borough needs to get some kind of recognition. So that's what that first item really speaks to. The second is that they have to be nonprofits, licensed businesses that can operate in Pennsylvania. The third is kind of covered by Parks and Recs, which is the applicants need to provide an event overview. So some of this stuff we're already doing. The fourth here, I think this one makes sense. It has to benefit the city and we have to show, like, if we were going to sponsor or not sponsor, but if we were to contribute or support an event, we would have to know how it's contributing back to the borough in some way. And that would be on the event organizer to sort of put that together and prove it. And then the fifth and sixth I had questions on. So those were basically about effective controls. I think we probably put that in place through our event application, our special event application. And then Parks and Rec already kind of handles number 7 here, an event budget. You know, we put that together. We put expenses together for how much something should cost, how much assistance is needed through Public Works, and so on and so forth. The police. Number 8, I had kind of a question about. I wasn't sure. I think most of our events already can't be the, you know, we would never 100% go in on something. We would have to have additional sources of funds. That's already kind of working. And so 9, applicants shall describe what percentage of funds will be expended within the city limits. So what's coming back to the borough? And then number 12 was the other one I had checked. Events shall be open to the public. And then, you know, we could even discuss that further. Should it be free admission? Should it be all ages? Should it encompass all areas of the borough? Or should it be the specific Gay Street, Market Street, potentially, you know, part of Darlington, or Walnut? Or we can discuss, you know, in terms of the overall footprint of the event, should it be free? So I think that this is a fairly good list to kind of go on. So I had basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, and 12. And again, we can rephrase these in terms of our language, in terms of how we see it. But I think those would be a good starting point for a list of criteria. Again, you know, they can't be, you know, we're not talking about our own events. We're talking about events that would be sponsored by an outsourced organization, either a charity or nonprofit. Some of those proceeds would probably benefit charities. Most of them end up doing so. So that's where I started. So the criteria is one thing, and then the source of funding was another thing. So some suggestions have been going back to a parking revenue share. That's the only one that's really on the table. Or we could come up with a schedule, depending on the order of magnitude, which complicates things, or how much we would hand out to event based on some of this criteria, which would be, I think, complex and probably take us a lot longer to get to. So I would be more aligned with the parking revenue share, similar to what we've done in the past, but have some strict criteria to follow. So it looks like we are being as objective as we possibly can.
I do think that makes sense. I would put in number 4, probably looking at incorporating the bid for some type of economic awareness and what the economic impact would be for particular events. Also mention in there estimated crowd size as well for particular events.
Yes, why would crowd size matter?
Because that would matter regarding police and or public works. So for example, if someone came to us about a run, right, a charity run, in which case that might take place downtown center, right? What's the impact going to be as far as how many runners and what is the plan thereafter to disperse them?
Some of these other criteria may end up knocking out a smaller event if they cannot provide estimates on economic impact. So we might have some of this, we would almost have to walk through an example of what we would consider and what we would not consider once we put a list together. But I think generally, if I look at this list of criteria for Wilmington, again, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, and 12. Again, kind of reworded. So a shorter list, still fairly comprehensive. Crowd size and economic impact may be highly correlated with each other.
What about number 6? Applicants must demonstrate strong financial management and effective controls, including cost effectiveness. I think that would make sense because in some cases, we need to make sure that they're going to be able to pay for those services.
I would be amenable to adding that one.
Can I just ask a question? Because I have this on the parking committee agenda also. And, you know, I had spoken to Barb. I was out of town when we talked about the special event fees last November, and I kind of chimed in from the ether. But after speaking to Barb and Keith about how the special event rates were structured, once Barb did the modification to the costs that we were passing on to applicants, the understanding, I think it was built around the fact that we removed some things that didn't make sense. There was depreciation values and benefit over time. But the goal was that it would just be a blanket parking revenue sharing situation so that council didn't have to vet or consider what should or should not happen downtown. And I think John O'Brien did a great job when he said, you know, you eat what you kill. So if they don't have a great performance and they don't get a ton of revenue, they still have to pay for that. They're still on the hook for it. I think, you know, in my mind, trying to run the parking department, I'm always like, I don't want to lose any revenue, but we will always be better off even sharing 50% of the revenue on a Sunday because we don't charge on Sundays. So Sunday events are a freebie, you know, and we could still split it 50-50 and not have to do all of this and put anyone in a precarious rating situation. It's really up to who can bring the people and what do they get for it? You know, it's up to them to bring more people to town. So I just wanted to put that back out there because that was what my goal, this was my whole spiel for the parking committee. But, you know, I thought that would just make it cleaner. If council doesn't want to fully share all of the revenue, we are adding lots this year. So we could give it a year and we could say we're only splitting parking garage revenue, all special event lot revenue stays with the borough, and we'd, again, still be better than we would be because $20 is always more than the $9 that you would get for that day. So I just wanted to put that out there because I don't want, you know, I don't know how we're going to get this done in a year. And I know that we do have the chili cook-off is Sunday, right? So I know this is going to come up again. And I know that the Christmas parade brought this on and was a very different sort of animal that we could never pull off. But I just wanted to put that out there because I think it does kind of make sense to just say, hey, let's split the parking garage revenue. And
Yeah, I think trying to put a schedule of like who gets what amount in terms of support would be a complete nightmare. That would take us forever to get to it. So I agree that
That's
the
hard.
cleanest
That's
way
hard
to
to do.
do it, you know, again, we would have to have some specifics put in place to who would qualify for parking revenue share. And I think that's what the job of this committee is. And then we would make a recommendation potentially that it would be a parking revenue share, but the parking committee would have to decide that.
I know we do have a lot of runs in town right now that I think they're covering their costs that are associated with it. From, you know, Keith's perspective, they cover their costs. It's a low impact to the borough and they don't get a special event fee. So they're not going to ever get revenue from that. So I think you're on the right track that if you just create a like simple policy, yes for this, no for that, you know, you're having a block party for your wife's retirement, you're not getting special event fees at the garage. So something like that might make your lives easier.
Yeah, I think the idea behind this whole discussion is we know that we get a benefit when some of these events go on. And it feels a little bit, I won't say greedy because that's not really the right word, but it feels like we shouldn't be just hoarding all of that. I feel like we should be supporting some of it. And then again, going back to number one, putting our name on part of this stuff too and getting ourselves out there. You know, the organizers are bringing people in. Westchester getting the recognition. Let's give some back. You agree with that?
I'm in agreement.
Okay, so I tell you what, I think maybe our next steps for this item are going to be me simplifying this list, starting with what we just talked about, going on this criteria for Wilmington, North Carolina as a proxy, and then putting a draft together to potentially talk about in work session. So we'll have a document ready to discuss this item. So we'll discuss it in the work session. All right. Any public comment on this item?
I have public comment. Lillian DeBaptiste, Mayor, Westchester. So a couple of things. I think there are two different issues, and I think you're intertwining them. I think one of them is what is a special event and making the decision on what that looks like. And you have the criteria from Wilmington that you've been going off of, but you've also said you've looked at other criteria. So I think it needs to be a discussion, more of an open discussion on which criteria that we choose as opposed to cherry picking them. So that's one, what is a special event? And then the other question is, how are we going to support all the different special events that Westchester has, the runs, the Christmas parade, you mentioned the chili cook-off. And I think before we really even have that discussion of how we're going to financially, because I imagine that's what you're talking about, financial support to them, we have the very real conversation of a shortfall in the budget. So I think it's very difficult for you to make some decisions today, if that's what you're making, in the next month or so, about supporting next year all of these different events, such as the chili cook-off, which is a wonderful event. And the gentleman came here last month and he talked about what they've done. However, before you start talking about what we're going to support or not, we really need to look at the budget before we start expending money on all these different events that the borough does support, in addition to initiating its own events. And again, I've said it before and I say it again, I think the money raised for parking is, all expenses are going up tremendously. And it seems to me foolhardy to give one of the few ways that, you can cover some expense of having all of these events here, is by sharing the revenue of the parking. I think that, again, we're looking at a big shortfall next year, and using parking money can lessen that shortfall. So that's what I just wanted to point out before we make
Thank you.
those
Appreciate it.
decisions.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And again, we're not making a decision right now. We're trying to have a conversation by putting something on a page that's more relevant to the borough than to Wilmington, North Carolina. All right. Okay, moving on to new business. The next item here is a motion to approve a resolution for participation in the Pennsylvania Audubon Society Bird Town Program.
Good evening. This should be comparatively much simpler. You may have seen signs for Birdtown popping up. Westtown Township, I think, is the closest one. But it's a relatively new municipal sustainability certification program. It's backed by Audubon Society and obviously focused on birds. But it's a lot bigger than that. To score well, you need to do things like open space, parks, stormwater management, clean energy initiatives, things that make Westchester and the whole world a better place to live for everyone. So I think this is a great initiative, but I think in a report 2 months ago, I mentioned there's a lot of these programs, and it was important to me with more and more demands on my time that this be led by our wonderful Sustainability Advisory Committee. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Connie McAvoy. If you don't know Connie, if everyone in the room doesn't know Connie, you should. She's a real force to be reckoned with and done a lot of good in Westchester, and she's going to talk a little bit more about this.
Hello, so I'm Connie McAvoy, and I'm chair of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, which I've been a member of for, I think, at least 10 years-ish. I was approached in early summer by PA Birdtown LLC, who are quite enterprising, and they got in touch and said, we think you have the right criteria to be a bird town right this minute. And I agreed, looking out my window at my bird feeders and my plants. And we reviewed just quickly on the phone that so many of the sustainable environmental initiatives that the borough has already enacted make us an obvious choice. We have 4 meadows, including one at Hillsdale School. We have, and the ones at the landfill area. The borough uses no pesticides on the borough managed properties. That's huge. There are a number of native areas because of our rain gardens and our pollinator gardens. There are just a million examples. As soon as she said Birdtown, I'm like, we're already it. Now it's a case of, are we green, bronze, silver, or gold? Phoenixville is bronze. No, they're green. We think we can be better. So the only thing that this would involve is $100 application fee. There is no renewal. There is an annual report that's needed to be done, which basically just updates that the things you're doing are expanding. The piece that I wasn't completely convinced about was the student part of this. They want young people to be ready to take on this initiative. So I talked to the superintendent of schools, and he said that they are ready for that, and there are a number of examples, and he's putting it on his weekly agenda with all of his staff to talk about. So I will get some feedback on that if this moves forward. The other thing that I discovered, thanks to another member of the committee, Megan Fork, who is a professor at Westchester U, is that Westchester U has a Cornell-educated ornithologist who has an avian lab. Bingo, bird club, bird trips, all sorts of things that are part of the boxes that would need to be checked. So the only other thing is that the Birdtown group provides a ton of materials, so we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel or even do printing, because they provide those things for free going forward. So the committee there needs to be a bird committee of 3 members. They don't have to come from within the Sustainability Advisory Committee. I'm prepared to be one of those members. So is Dr. Jennifer Euling, who is the avian bird lady at Westchester U. She's prepared to be the second. And we're hoping to get somebody from the Westchester Bird Club to be the third, and maybe a few other members. But that's where we are in terms of the work that we've done so far. But we need the borough to approve the resolution so that we can go ahead and do the application and get those signs up that they actually provide.
Where else would this show up as like Birdtown, like some other ideas of where we would be able to put that like as our designation?
There are road signs that would be coming into the borough. It's also something that could be incorporated into, obviously, the website and, various logos. We're already a tree town, apparently at least 25 years. I can't quite get a number on that, but it may be as many as 30 years. And I think that through interactions with the university and also with the local Audubon chapter, we could make that even more robust.
Thank you. Comments?
No, I think it's a good idea.
Any public comments? Put this through as a 2-0
Yeah.
for work session. Thank you very much.
Sure. And one of the wonderful things is that we can all say, go birds.
Go Birds. All right. Any other business?
No.
All right. We are adjourned at 6 o'clock on the dot.